Thank you. It's so nice to see all of you here this morning. It's so good to see old friends and old colleagues and to welcome new visitors, so thank you. I first want to congratulate the Center for Studies in Higher Education on its 60th anniversary. It's a really significant time of its founding because I always think of the center as having been Clark Kerr's creation and really growing up at about the same time that the master plan was conceived. And so that there's a very close identity between this visionary idea for higher education in California and the Center for Studies in Higher Education. In my year and a half in which I directed the center, I learned an enormous amount about higher education, and it really is informing what I'm doing now as chancellor. So I think of those 18 months as a real gift to me. The topic of this conference, New Nationalism and Universities, couldn't be more timely. And John has asked me what I think is a rather daunting but intriguing task to connect the topic of the conference to free speech on campus. This is a moment of ambition, as many of you know, for the development of universities in the world. There are many, many countries that are trying to develop what the word that's often used is world-class universities. And yet this ambition on the part of many universities to develop world-class universities is inseparable from nationalism. And I find that conjunction a really interesting conjunction between global ambitions and nationalist ambitions. We've had debates in the Center for Studies in Higher Education over the years about whether you can have a world-class university without academic freedom. I believe that's not possible. I believe that freedom of inquiry is absolutely essential to have a comprehensive university at the highest level. Academic freedom, of course, is different from free speech, but I think of it as like a Venn diagram. They really overlap in important ways. Freedom of speech, of course, is free speech. I shouldn't say freedom of speech. Free speech is very much associated with Berkeley and with the free speech movement. And understanding the free speech movement is critical for understanding what's going on now. The free speech movement originated in students' desire to have freedom of political speech on campus. Though the most important motivation of this was from the left, specifically from the civil rights movement. Mario Savio had been down organizing in the South in the 60s and wanted to be able to recruit for people to travel in the South and work in civil rights. He was joined by people on the right, and so the student governing committee for the free speech movement was a combination of people from Republicans, Democrats, people on the left, people on the right. Now the free speech movement has become ironically somewhat reversed on campuses. So in the 1960s, the students were for free speech, the administration was against it. Now the administration is for free speech and many students are against it. It's a very, very different moment because free speech has been adopted by the alt-right as one of its strategies to construct a narrative about universities that is extremely useful for their political goals. Specifically that universities don't support free speech and therefore they're really hypocritical. We've had what I sometimes call the tale of two speeches at Berkeley this fall. We first had a speaker, Ben Shapiro, who is very much a serious conservative thinker, someone with whom I profoundly disagree on many, many subjects, but someone that should be able to speak on a university campus. Then we had a kind of extravaganza planned by a right-wing provocateur, Free Speech Week, although Free Speech Week was only 4 days long. And it was an extraordinary array of speakers who were allegedly invited, 25 speakers over 4 days, really occupying the center of campus. And this was meant to really provoke the university into canceling it. And it's important to understand that narrative, because the narrative was not conservative wants to speak on campus, wants to engage on campus, but rather what can a provocateur do that will motivate the university to take certain actions that will support the narrative that he's trying to create. Well, we called his bluff, and finally the conservative movement, or the Milo's Free Speech Week, collapsed of its own weight. That was fortunate for Berkeley, but nonetheless, I think it's extraordinarily important for universities, certainly in the United States, to support free speech. First of all, in a public university, it's the law. This is not a choice that we have. But secondly, as I hope I've showed you very briefly, not supporting free speech plays into a narrative of the far right to discredit universities. So it's just extraordinarily important that we not play that part in that narrative. And finally, I believe that the best answer to hateful speech is more speech. The term that John Stuart Mill used on liberty in his arguments for freedom of speech, the marketplace of ideas, sounds to me a little quaint right now. But nonetheless, I think it's absolutely foundational to the university that all ideas can be said and argued with, debated. And so we have much to do, certainly in the United States, in recapturing that ground, both in universities but also in society at large, for civil and really sharp debate. The second argument that John Stuart Mill uses in On Liberty about freedom of speech is one about censorship. He says if you agree, or if you hold the belief that speech should be restricted, free speech should be restricted in some way, some government authority has to be the censor. And what government authority would you trust to be the censor? So I think this is a really fruitful conjunction to reflect upon, to contemplate the relationship between the new nationalism in universities, to their global ambitions, to globalism, and then to academic freedom and freedom of speech. I hope you have a wonderful conference. I heard that the first day was splendid, and I hope this day is just as splendid. So welcome to Berkeley, and thank you for being here.